course, like most Christian kids, we learn the books of the Bible, the 12 apostles, the 15 judges, the 12 sons of Jacob, but we also learn the generations from Adam to Jesus. And I've thought sometimes, is that worthless or useless? And it's not at all, because it gives a framework to tie things to in reading the Bible. And then all the rest of the Bible, you can hook it to some other person in this line and whatever. It's amazing how what you learn so young sticks with you, isn't it? I can't say them all the way to Jesus, but 50-something years ago, I learned to say Adam, Seth, Enos, Cainan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Arphaxad, Salah, Eber, Peleg, Reu, Serug, Nahor, Terah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Perez, Hezron, Ram, Amminadab, Nahshon, Salmon, Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David, Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, Manasseh, Ammon, and Josiah. And shortly after that, they go into Babylonian captivity, and then there are 14 more, but I've forgotten them, so I can't brag. But Athens Bible School was that kind of a place, and we had chapel every day, and it was a great thing to have that. My Bible teacher in 12th grade was a godly man named Brother Rawlings, and his idea of teaching Bible was memorizing Scripture. So that year we learned 1,300 verses of Scripture on about 80 different topics. And that's why I say, oh God, you've taught me from my youth. After the Bible school, which that old building at the top of the picture there is kind of a resemblance of, I went to Florida Christian College in Tampa, Florida, which is the one with the palm trees. And that was a school, it was a junior college then, but I went there particularly because a teacher there by the name of Homer Haley. Brother Haley has been dead for a few years now. He died at age 96 or 98, having just written a book on conditional immortality, by the way, in which he taught what we believe. He told me that shortly before he died that he had read that he knew I had sent him a copy of my book 20-something years before, but he had never read it because he wanted to study the Bible for himself without reading anybody else first. But Brother Haley was a legend among churches of Christ. He just about memorized the prophets of the Bible, and the minor and major prophets both. And when he preached, he would quote from Amos and Hosea and Isaiah and Ezekiel, just like most preachers quote from Acts or Romans or John. At Florida Christian College under Brother Haley, we studied verse by verse. And in 3 years, I was privileged to sit at his feet through all the major prophets and all the minor prophets, verse by verse, plus the Gospel of John, the book of Ephesians, the book of Colossians, the book of Hebrews, and the book of Revelation. And that was the reason I went to that school. Then I transferred as a senior to Abilene Christian University in Texas, which is the big golden sphere at the bottom there on the left side as you look at it. And that was my parents' college as well. But I went there and majored in Greek, which I had been majoring in earlier, and got a bachelor's degree in Greek and Bible. And I had met at Florida Christian College. I met Sarah Faye Locke from Franklin, Tennessee, who has now been my wife for 41 years. And she went with me after we both graduated from college. She graduated from Peabody in Nashville, was an English teacher for a number of years, and I went to Abilene Christian, and right after we graduated, we got married, and then moved to Abilene for another year, and I did a master's degree in biblical languages, which was primarily Greek with a little bit of Hebrew there. After that, I went to be the pastor of a Church of Christ in St. Louis, Missouri, Kirkwood Church of Christ. That's a suburb of St. Louis, and was there 4 years. And while I was there, my intention was to get into a PhD program at St. Louis University and be a teacher. That's what I really wanted to do, and that's what I'd wanted to do since I'd been in graduate school. In order to get into the PhD program, however, I had to have some prerequisite courses. So I went for 21 semester hours to Covenant Theological Seminary, which was Reformed Presbyterian and quite conservative, and to Eden Theological Seminary, which was United Church of Christ, no kin to Church of Christ, and quite liberal. And that was rather interesting to be taking classes at both those places at the same time. While I was at Covenant Seminary, I had the privilege one summer of having an intensive all-day, everyday course for a solid week under Francis Schaeffer, who some of you have read after in years past, I'm sure, and his picture is on the picture there as well. The other picture is Eden Seminary, but it seemed like I was just studying all the time, and I still have dreams and sometimes nightmares that I've been called back to some school by an official who says you missed a certain test and we're going to take your degrees away from you unless you come back and pass this test. It's been so long since I was there. Now I'm always in big trouble, but that's a dream I have occasionally. Probably from eating too soon before I went to bed. Next slide, please. In the course of this life to that point, and I was 24 years old when we moved to St. Louis, the Lord made me fruitful and was with us through good times, and then, as I'll come to in a moment, through some very sad times. Psalm 71, verses 7 and 8 says, I have become a marvel to many, for you are my strong refuge. My mouth is filled with your praise and with your glory all day long. Paul talks about in Corinthians how God takes the nobodies of this world and confounds the somebodies. And he takes the foolish and the simple and confounds the wise. And God can use people who don't have power in themselves and don't have wisdom in themselves and don't have goodness or greatness in themselves to do great things through his power and for his name's sake. And we become a marvel to many people. If nothing else, they marvel that God could do anything through us. But God is God, and he can do what he wants to do. As I learn more about it, I'll say more about it a little later. So God did make me fruitful, and during those early years I was preaching in the Kirkwood Church of Christ, which is a picture of the building there in St. Louis. I started writing books. I wrote a little book called The Grace of God, which at that time, in the early 1970s, was just about the only thing available in the Churches of Christ on the grace of God. There were a couple of other things, but not very many. I wrote a commentary on Hebrews in 1973 called Our Man in Heaven, to which F.F. Bruce wrote a foreword. And I published a little book called Christianity Without Ulcers, which was a daily readings of articles from my church bulletin. And the idea there was that sometimes Christians have ulcers, but Christianity shouldn't give you ulcers. And if your kind of Christianity gives you ulcers, you haven't got the right kind of Christianity. So that's the point of that book. But God did bless us and made us fruitful, and I held quite a few special meetings in churches and began to be known in our circles and was respected, and I thought life was really going down a good path. I would soon be through with my prerequisites, get a Ph.D., teach in college, write books, and I didn't know what life might be thereafter. Well, all of that came to a screeching halt in February 5 of 1972. We got a call one day from home. We were in St. Louis there. My family of origin was in Athens, Alabama. Got a call from home, and Mother said, your daddy has come back from Florida Christian Bible lectures. He caught a bad cold while he was down there. He's got the flu, and he won't go to the doctor. He's taking bed rest at home and drinking orange juice and eating vitamin C. And that's what we knew about it. 7 days went by, and I got another phone call. Sarah Faye and I had just put our dinner on some old-fashioned metal TV trays and set them up in the living room and turned on All in the Family to watch Archie Bunker. And the telephone rang again, and I just knew in my spirit when I heard the phone ring what it was. And sure enough, when I answered, it was my next brother, Henry, and he said, can you come home? Daddy's dead. And he had gone from flu to pneumonia in 1 week, and then did not get the treatment that he should have. And by the time Mother realized what was happening and put him in the hospital, it was too late to stop it. So he died at age 57, cut short from a very fruitful life. And it seemed to me like the world came crashing down. At that point, we decided that Sarah Faye and I, we had no children yet, should move back from St. Louis to Athens, Alabama, and help my mother with a family publishing business. Well, one little detail here that's going to be important in just a minute. My dad was a very conservative person in his doctrine, but he was also very broad-minded about other people. In other words, he had narrow ideas, but he was broad in his fellowship. And he would say to other people, I don't ask you to agree with me, I just ask you to understand what I'm saying. And he would say, wherever God has a child, I have a brother. And so I grew up in that kind of environment, even though I was in the Church of Christ, which some of my neighbors were very legalistic and sectarian. My parents were neither of those, and I grew up with this good influence of finding truth wherever you can find it, and welcoming God's people wherever you encounter them. So with that in mind, there was a big controversy going on in those days in the churches of Christ about denominational feuds, where there are two sides that have some kind of issue and they get down and dirty and all this kind of stuff. And that was going on through those years. Well, there was one paper that a lot of people subscribed to, which advocated one position in that particular squabble. And my dad had recently bought that paper and moved it to Alabama with the intention of changing its whole character and turning it into a constructive family journal. I need to tell you that to make sense of what's coming next.